All right, welcome back. Friday, another Houdini. This time it's going to be switching it up a little bit. So instead of like a lecture-based lesson kind of format, this is just going to be kind of more messing around, making just like kind of Instagram art, daily art, or more making something that looks cool. Thanks. Yeah. Working on the format, working on the music and stuff like that. So we're gonna let's fucking go. We're gonna just keep the mood light and see what happens. Black Uku, good to see you. What is it Alex, your first name? Mkia? Mr. Wazoo? So usually when I'm messing around, okay, you just go by Alex. Usually when I'm just messing around, I'll start with like a sphere as a starting point or test object or whatever. I don't know if you guys have favorite geometries to play around with. The pig. The pig is very, very famous in the Houdini world. the pigs aren't getting a lot of love right now. We have a double pandemic. The virus and then a swine flu is going around as well. So I'm gonna try to make an interesting noise pattern, but I want it to be a vector, like directional kind of field. So sometimes when I'm setting up forces and stuff like that, I'll usually maybe go into normal just to visualize things at the start, because that way it points in the direction of the velocity and everything like that. So if you do velocity trail, this is going like behind everything. So it's a little bit harder to visualize things. So I'll put it into both just to make it a little bit more clear. Sorry, I'm still figuring out the music. It was a little too loud in my headphones. I was distracting myself. So velocity goes behind things like that, and normal goes forward. It's kind of, velocity is kind of like it's getting blown in the wind or left behind, like a flag or something like that. You like wave a streamer around. So this was the hurricane kind of tornado vortex technique we did with that smoke. I did it very quickly. I don't know if everyone saw it, but I tried something like this, like blowing the smoke off of that triangle. And if you want to do like the equivalent of a transform SOP inside of a VOP network, you can just do this make transform and multiply the position by it. It makes a matrix, which is like a complicated data type, but this interface here is the same as the transform SOP. So you can you don't need to worry about the math and the fanciness if you want to just, like I can rotate my point position here like it would be with a transform SOP. You can also do scaling and all those other operations. Now I was also upgrading my redshift. If you look in the Twitch panels or whatever, it's Houdini 3.0 or redshift 3.02 or something like that. So I have the Maxon noises in my redshift networks now. I saw some people did with like Solaris, and that's okay. You go by Belkin or you go by Sergey? It's we're just doing more of a hangout today where it's like I'm just making kind of Instagram art, like daily art or whatever. So we can kind of deform or distort this cross product by adding noise to the point position. So instead of perfectly spherical or flat, just add some disturbance or noise kind of distortion. This kind of, so you're asking about projecting curves onto a surface, like putting them on the front of a shoe or a sphere. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It just depends a lot on I don't know, what you have to work with, I guess. Like sometimes you have UV attributes or other like little bits of data that you can use. If you have a grid like this, yeah, the ray and creep are pretty good ones. Sometimes what I'll do is like, this is basically what the creep SOP is doing, but if you get a little grid, I'm just moving it into UV space. So this is like 0 to 1 instead of centered at the origin or whatever. I'm gonna go to X, Y. So get rid of this one. Basically the point positions now are like within, they're basically like a UV space or whatever. And then if I have a sphere, I'll leave it as the primitive type, because this actually has some useful kind of attributes. So if it has these like intrinsics or parametric UVs kind of. So if I set my position now to looking at the primitive UV of that first input, and then I'm getting the surface position or point position, and the primitive number is 0, just because it's just going to be one shape. So it will always be the first primitive. And then I can just use my source point position here. So it doesn't look like anything that's special, but basically what's happening is this grid is getting like wrapped around the sphere that way. And you can do the same thing with other shapes. You just have to make sure it's a single surface, like primitive, either primitive type like this is a sphere primitive, or with NURBS it will work that way as well. Yeah, this is a really useful way to get grids, or I don't know, any kind of geometry if you have the attributes onto your surface. So if I look at this grid, if I move it around, then you can see kind of what's happening. So we're switching from like flat two-dimensional space and projecting or using UV coordinates, like creeping the shape onto these surfaces. So if I had a shoe model or something like that, maybe we will bust out the pig today. The pigs are out. So if I did want to get this grid a little bit better onto this guy, I could first do this sphere to get it kind of in a somewhat lined up place, and then do like a projection from that like smooth relocated position, and then I don't know, there's different methods and stuff like that, but sometimes you can do like a combination of smoothing and raying geometry to like get it back closer to the surface or whatever. But that's, I don't know, that can be a good way to project stuff onto things. So even if you do this like trace, they have some nice pictures of butterflies and stuff like that in their folder. Sometimes I use these as like test images. So just want to move this into UV space, like centered at 0.5 instead of centered at the origin. I was just typing these in the wrong place. But then you can see we're kind of like transferring or applying this to whatever shape we want. So it's a pretty cool way to distort things onto other surfaces. But it just has to be a NURBS or primitive, like, I don't know, I guess this is it is a primitive, but Houdini uses that word for other things as well. It's kind of like a platonic shape, I guess, or something like that. But like tube, that's another one that just will let you create a primitive type. So this is a pretty useful way just to like distort or change spaces for geometry. So I was going over here. This is going to be my main project or whatever today, and yeah, I'll just leave this in the file if anyone wants to play around with it some more. So I was just setting up some directional vectors over here, using putting them in the normals just to visualize them a little bit easier, and then this is what I'm going to use to try to create just some kind of Instagram style art, just a kind of like a sketch, a simple render. Try doing this step earlier. It looked like my rotation wasn't like applying. I don't know. Maybe I want to do this. That doesn't look right. So now I'm just converting these to VDB to basically rasterize them or convert my point attribute to a volume attribute. And instead of making one of these, I can actually just sample a point attribute using these guys. I don't think this one really matters. Sometimes you change it, but I don't think anything else in Houdini like recognizes this vector type, so it's it's nice. Like, I'm kind of OCD, so I set it all the time to make sure like it's qualifying this data type. But the other operations like transform stops don't treat it differently depending on what you've set that to. That was the wrong VDB advect. It was for volumes, it wasn't for points or geometry. So this guy should be doing something. So I think it was this point radius scale. When you get stuff to be too big, sometimes it will, like VDB tries to use the bandwidth so it doesn't fill in the inside. So I just didn't have any values or voxels where the actual surface was. So you can shrink this down to fill in that area. Or if you increase these half band voxels, all these make it take longer because it's like more information it has to fill. So I tried to make the voxel size smaller, like higher resolution. I think that messed up everything even more. Let's just keep stuff around there. These things here are getting a little funky. I don't know about it. Usually, I don't know exactly what you're asking about combining velocity fields. Mathematically, like the best operation to use, typically you add the two values together. With Houdini, to do that actual operation, I think just this VDB combine usually gets used. You can also do I think volume mix. It's just like a typical composite node where you have an A and B input, and then these are the different mathematical operations. So these kind of have the same list. This one has some extra ones for SDF values and stuff like that. But it's just up to you, which it's not always the best, but typically add is good. Sometimes you might want to do like average. I would be careful about the maximum or minimum, because I don't know if it uses, if you're using that with like a vector volume, I don't know if it uses the magnitude as maximum, or it might just look at like the X component and it might not be correct. So not too sure about that shape. Hey, Frosting Fire. How's it going? So we'll do, you can also add directly to them using this volume VOP. Sometimes it can be a little bit slower than these operations. So this one here, I just need to make sure that it's, you kind of have to like set up your own output. So whatever volumes you want to write to or modify, you just set up that. And then you can just like reuse them to get an input as well. So now I'm getting the input velocity value and then outputting it. Then if I just add like my position coordinate, that will move everything out a little bit more. So we can add curl noise to this, get some extra interesting kind of stuff happening. I usually use this vector 3 to vector 4. You get some extra like interesting stuff you can do with this extra input. So you could use it to evolve the noise over time, like it's slowly updating. Or you can also like add another noise value to it to get like crazy distortions. All right, this is looking a little better. So I have different noises here that's adding randomness to things. This is like a low frequency one that's disturbing things. And then this noise right here will, it's kind of like, yeah, the sun, like solar flares or something like that. So you get pretty interesting things with these flow lines. It's always like pasta noodles or spaghetti or something like that too. Yeah, it might look better with the pig or some other more interesting shape. I don't know, sometimes I like to get my system figured out on a simpler shape and then apply it to like my final. So I'm like building the tool right now that I'm going to use for the final thing. Sometimes I usually like to go to this website, 3D Scans. There's other ones as well, but this one looks like some of these might be new. I don't know if I don't think I've seen all these yet, but this is a good place to go just to find interesting busts or statues or stuff like that to play effects around with. So they're adding. I didn't realize they were adding to their database. The other cool thing about this, maybe these ones are too new, but the ones that have been around for a while, they usually will, or maybe they stopped doing it, but they had been adding like other artists' work examples or whatever with them. So each one would have a gallery of new pictures or artworks or whatever that people made using that statue as like a source. This kind of stuff is that like curvature, masking or whatever. It's pretty fun to do. And then I also have some stuff that I just have on my disk that I'll use as well, like skulls or just like a little library or whatever of stuff that I've accumulated over time. I had some like a human skull in here. I don't know where it went though. I'm horribly unorganized in this sense. Yeah, so this guy, Billy Ellis, or Billy Liss, he released this on Gumroad or something like that. You could find some pretty well modeled skulls. And then sometimes when you're just pulling in other models from, you don't know what software it was used or what size it is, you just go in with this match size, scale to fit, uniform scale, and then that kind of like unitizes or makes sure that it will fit inside of a unit box. So we look at our other geometry that we usually use in Houdini, and it will be about the same size as that. Otherwise here you can see it's just like 10 times, 100 times bigger or something like that. Yeah, I used to do a bunch of transform nodes with expressions, and just kind of convoluted, and some people have made OTLs, I think, just because they don't know that this was like a newer feature that they added to this. It's kind of doing probably what a lot of people were doing before with the transform nodes, but super nice that they have it built in, and you don't have to worry about using like the QLib Houdini asset library or external dependencies. So sometimes if you're doing velocity volume stuff, sometimes it makes more sense just to kind of make a domain like this, like you're doing with Pyro. Then you don't have to worry about the sparse or inactive voxels that you get with like VDB stuff sometimes. And then this guy's just getting mad at me because it's not a VDB. You can do that pretty quickly. And then this guy wants it to be a single vector, one volume instead of a 3 scalar volume for each component. So I don't know if that was the best idea. I'm just gonna keep going with this one. I like that like spiraling kind of thing that was happening with it. So I think because this is like millions of points, it's pretty slow to sample into a volume. So sometimes it's quicker just to like scatter points on the surface. And then you could see that cooked like almost instantly. So instead of trying to stamp like 1,000,000 points or 500,000 points into a volume, we just go to 1,000. And then everything right now, I'm treating it as such a like big or blobby volume, it doesn't really matter. Kind of like he's wearing goggles or something like that. So one thing we can do, I think, is that's a pretty cool one. If we want to keep this, maybe I'll just save that one for later. If we want to keep this stuff on the surface, like constrained to him a little bit better, instead of having noise. So So we'll just go back out to this view. We add some vectors that are pointing towards the surface of his head. Then we can kind of nudge, like redirect stuff back to the surface. Sometimes to do a quick visualization of just these like raw fields, you do the slice and then the volume trail. And then you get just a very simplistic visualization. So you can use this function xyz dist with the second input index 1 or whatever. This will find the nearest position on that surface. And then to get a specific attribute or any additional information, basically you get the prim number and position on that primitive that is the nearest like location. And then you can use this to find color. I'm just going to use it to find the position in this case. So you get something kind of funky with that. Sometimes I just go into manual update so I can add like a couple nodes without stuff cooking. So if we just do, whoops, pressed too many keys. So if we just do a subtract, this should give us vectors that are pointing to the surface. Sometimes just to double check the direction, I'll slide this growth or length of the trails just to make sure that they're heading in the right direction. Sometimes you get them pointing in the other thing and it's a bit frustrating or whatever. So now this guy is shoving the velocity directions to be on the surface. But if we mix, so this is what I was talking about earlier, like, who is it, Alex, that asked about merging, combining velocities. So just doing this add operation, then you combine the two. And then I can normalize this one so it's just a unit direction. Sometimes this thing gets messed up. If you mash on the escape key too often with Houdini, it seems like it kind of gets itself into a flustered state. So I'm just gonna save this. You just have to like save your file and reopen it, and usually that will fix it. You think it's maybe I'm making it more complicated than it is. With Houdini, I think it just makes things more complicated. What do you mean regular Insta art? Like a painting, just a more traditional drawing or something like that? Or stuff that other people are, oh yeah. So what I had done was normalize my vector, which will just make sure that it's always like a specific length. If you don't do that, basically these vectors will get stronger as they get further from the surface and less intense or less strong as they get close to the surface. But if we're doing something to keep everything on the surface, this might be what we want, to have stuff feathered off like that. I'm just going to do a multiply shiny spheres in a landscape. That's quite an easy approach to take. So if you just do this software here, this is like an Instagram art machine. You just type in like random numbers, get a terrain, and post it. You're done. So basically I'm using this to make my force to cause things to adhere or conform to the surface less strong. So we're doing like 10% of that. Maybe we want to do like 40% of that force. Hopefully like, the visualization kind of makes sense. So I don't know about that make transform. Sometimes you can just type in two numbers here to get a halfway point, like a vector pointing along an angle. I'm just trying to get something a little bit more interesting that isn't default lined up with the y-axis or the pole. And then the more resolution that I add to this, the better my velocities will be able to travel through things. Sometimes you don't have enough resolution and it's like a low resolution image or texture or something like that. Whoa. Somehow he got a mohawk. Do you guys know why this spikes happened? So basically, because I jacked up this value so high to such a strong number, as these particles trace through the velocity field, they kind of ricochet back and forth. So it's like my force to push stuff back into the surface of his skull is so strong now that it's like overcorrecting and trying to like rebalance. So you kind of get that like ping pong. So it's pretty cool. It's almost like audio, little audio waves or something like that. But that's just why it's happening. So like it's usually sometimes useful to know why it's happening. So if someone does like point it out and ask you to make changes about it, then you know how to control it because you know how it's being created. So for example, if I increase these substeps, it goes away. If I reduce the substeps, the particle is taking less steps through the velocity field. So you would get like more correcting and overcorrecting and stuff like that, essentially. So I'm just gonna get a color ramp to assign different colors to some of those individual strands. Yeah, that'd be cool to do a hair. You get like extra fuzzy, curly kind of stuff if you do because those would be like your guides. Then you could upres or whatever from there. Didn't like my command. I doubled up on some of this stuff. Alright, I'll be right back. I'm gonna get more water. You like my splash screen, Black Ruku? You call him Mr. MR? My lord. So I usually leave this set to elem number, and then that's kind of like a trick, so you could switch between points and primitives, and this will automatically grab either the point number or the primitive number depending on what this VOP or what the wrangle is running over. Sometimes it doesn't carry over if you assign it to primitives, so you have to move it onto the points for some of these nodes to pick it up. It lets you work faster if you have a file with a bunch of these stuff ready to go. You use someone else recommended some other apps to me or whatever, but it's Adobe Kuler. I guess they're rebranding it or whatever to Color. You get like trends here. These design trends or palettes is kind of Instagram trends as well, so you can get quick Instagram looks this way too. And then with this stuff, it's super cool too, because Houdini you can just like, you don't really need to even you don't even need to copy and paste them in. So if I just float this window on top, do a mostly new color palette. You do like control middle mouse button, and then you click that and drag, and then you can sample these things directly into your file. So once you do that enough times, you have like muscle memory or whatever, and you can do it really quickly. There's also Python scripts and stuff like that, I think, that some people have made that automates some of this stuff, but it just, I don't know. Sometimes I don't use that stuff. Yeah, I was writing values, and it is super frustrating, especially I think the Adobe ones are going from like 1 to 255, so I was like dividing all of those numbers by hand or whatever each time, or using expressions, and it was like just super frustrating. But yeah, it's a little tedious or whatever, but it's a good way to get colors from online or whatever. The cheat zone, the tier 1 strategies. It's like, do you guys ever get the video game books, or like the cheat manuals or whatever? They don't make them as much, but you used to have to go to like the gaming store and get the what happened here? My color got messed up or something. But yeah, it was like the cheat guide or the cheat manual. Then I think even before those, there was this Nintendo hotline that you would call to get the cheats, or I think you would like, you would call them, and someone on the other line would like help you beat the game over the telephone or something like that. But it might have been called the like power line or something like that. But they would print this phone number on the back of their games, and you would have to dial in using your like rotary telephone. Yeah, you could. The side effect support could open up another business model doing that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna set this stuff aside. I'm kind of gonna branch off and do it. I'm not gonna go with those spikes for right now. So I'll just save that as like another thought process or something. I don't know why this color channel here keeps switching away from green for whatever reason. So sometimes when I just want to make a simple like fall off, like I don't know too much about Cinema 4D, but I know this. They do these things called fall off fields. I think Henry has implemented them with mops, but they're very useful for like art directing or controlling effects. So you can do different types of fall offs using all the different primitive shapes. Like you can have a cylinder fall off. Houdini doesn't have that kind of stuff built in. I think it's even like tied in with fields, like in Cinema 4D. I'm not exactly sure, but Houdini doesn't have those built in, so I just kind of replicate it by making a point position, and then I'll use the distance from that point position as like you're basically making like a 3D alpha channel to blend between effects. So I kind of do other stuff like that using in my in the earlier working streams or whatever, where I did like the sort by the proximity to the point, and then you just do the like cost attribute or surface distance, and then you have like a mask. You can also measure just the distance to that point. That actually might be a little bit quicker for this one. We'll just do it a different way too for fun. So my fall off position, we'll just set that equal to the point position of that sphere. Then my fall off distance is just going to be the length of the surface current position minus the fall off position. We'll just go into, I'm going to work with the color attribute as a point value. So now it's at 0 when it's closest to that, and then just goes infinitely bright. It's like the actual distance in units. But if we want that to be an alpha, like a mask channel, we just want to remap it. So we'll fit from a minimum to maximum. We want to remap that range to 0, 1. So it's like a mask or alpha channel. pretty cool. If you make tools like this, you can actually, so if I make a new shelf over there or whatever, you can actually drag and drop these, like any node, into that shelf. And then if I did just like rename this to fall off, I think I renamed the wrong thing. Then I just have, oh no, it didn't like it. Maybe I need to be network type. I don't know, I've done this before. I think I messed something up. Alright, let's try it like this. So the other thing I guess you can do with it is under context, this tab sub menu path. Then whenever I press tab, I don't know which category it puts it into, but if I just type in my fall off, then it will basically just run that script or the macro or whatever that I created, and I can have access to that tool whenever I want. So it's kind of like a halfway between an actual digital asset, an HDA, and like a full-fledged, or I guess just like it's another cheat code, I guess. So I'm going to use this mask to only add velocity to that region, to kind of like distort or to further disturb that part of it. So now it's way too strong. I also usually go to these analytic noise functions. And then it's being applied everywhere uniformly. So if I just multiply this, not right there, I want to multiply the strength of my noise, then I'm applying that alpha channel. Sometimes when I'm working in another chain like this, just use this attribute copy. So I'm just saying only take the resulting point position. Then I can work over here in like a debug kind of view or something like that if I want. So I think this noise is a little bit too low of a frequency. Whoops, you have to go the other way. And then just like a curl noise is the closest you can get to a fluid simulation, like a velocity field with a noise inside of a VOP network like this. Because it's basically trying to do the same type of math, like you get swirls and stuff with it. But you don't get as much detail applying it this way, because it's just doing, like it's looking at the noise value and moving one time. It's taking one step through the noise. Velocity head. So sometimes what I do is this for loop with feedback, and I'll wrap up my velocity, like advection or noise disturbance inside of that. And then this keeps rerunning everything, like recycling, or it's like doing 10 iterations essentially. So now if I divide my value by 10 or just make it shorter, now it's doing like 10 steps. It's looking at that noise value and it keeps getting new positions. So instead of linearly like moving from here to there, it's tracing 10 steps through the noise or whatever. As you just get more detailed results that way. And then with these lines, like we have pretty good resolution here, but as I move them outwards, they stretch out and they get too flat in certain areas like that. So we can do a resample each iteration to make sure it hasn't gotten too big of gaps, I guess. Something bad happened. Okay, so that's now this color transfer won't work anymore because my my point count is changing. So I'm just going to, I think I can do it with this. So you, instead of doing a swap, you can do a copy. So I'll just do my color and move it into this attribute. It's just a copy of my original color. And then at the end of my working chain, just swap them, and then we're back in good shape. So now we just have some extra motion or interest or whatever that's happening within that velocity displacement that we did to things. You guys think Vice City has it did have some of the best cheat codes. The Grand Theft Auto games got pretty wild where you could have like an airplane sitting in your cul-de-sac as soon as you stepped outside. Like it was some of the best cheats. So this wireframe is starting to get pretty slow. And then Houdini will always try to just draw these as like wireframe lines. But if you make a width attribute, then you can visualize them or look at them as ribbons, kind of. And then there's just this is another cheat. So I think under MISC, if you go shade open curves, then it draws them actually like ribbons. So it's just a lot faster to display things this way once you get like under a certain size or whatever. This is kind of like his brains are falling out. I mean, with Houdini, it will render and redshift as well because they use this attribute to decide the thickness of the curves when they render. So we just want to do a quick test. It's probably going to look pretty shitty because I don't have any lights in my scene, so it's just going to be the headlight. But the width, like the thickness of everything will line up. So it's pretty good to work that way. So you get the same thicknesses and stuff like that. And then this kind of stuff here right now is happening just because these surfaces are too close together. It's kind of like a ray biasing issue or something like that. We might want, there's some ways to fix that. We'll just see what we need to do. And then if you want them to actually look round when you render them, I think if you just use this hair normal, this one like bends the normal across the surface. So it simulates like how a tube kind of looks. So I don't know, it might be my my OBS. It doesn't like when I drag and drop stuff. Like my Linux is doing too many video operations at once. But that hair normal basically gives you a distorted normal. It's kind of like doing the same thing if you ever use round edges in a shader. It's just moving the normal to simulate like a smoother or subdivided surface. So now we're able to get things, they're the same width. You can't, for whatever reason, you can't get that same rounding to happen like in the Houdini viewport, I don't think. But it's pretty cool. Whoops. It's like a RenderMan or something. RenderMan 1. Do you guys like this classic shader? Stuff right here is pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know, the Princess Castle one I'm not a big fan of. Seems like they had some good ideas in mind when they did it, but I don't know, I'm still not fully on board with that Princess Castle one yet. So I'm just gonna get rid of that so it stops doing my highlights that way. Yeah, I think people still use the classic shader. They'll use it, and people who are just, it's more of a traditional visual effects kind of way of shading things. Like Arnold Render, I think they still use the similar maps and maths and stuff like that. V-Ray might be switching over. Redshift might be somewhat like halfway switching. Both, a lot of renderers offer both options. And I think like Cycles in Blender, they have both options as well. But I think that the Princess Castle way is like a games workflow, like normal Baker or like Marmoset Toolbag will output maps in PBR fashion or whatever. It's a little bit weird though because I don't know, PBR is a very like malleable term. It can mean a lot of different things. So it gets used in a lot of other places, and it's just now it's become such a misleading, like confusing phrase to use. So I'm just going to try to get a better noise pattern here to have this stuff looking a little bit better. I don't think it's Pixar. I think it was originally, I mean, they're all under the Disney umbrella now, but it has that Princess Castle in it because it was like a Disney Disney animation workflow or paper or whatever. Not princess. So basically, Disney wrote a SIGGRAPH paper, and then Side Effects read the paper and made the Princess Castle shader. And that's why it has the Disney Parks Princess Castle or whatever on it. So they're using this paper or whatever to do the maths. So Arnold. Yeah, I don't know. So Disney, for feature animation of Disney style, you end up you don't need things to look realistic. But for visual effects and most of the stuff Intagma does, or advertising and film, you want things to behave more realistically. So it doesn't make sense. It has the picture of a princess castle. So Arnold released their own paper that I wish that Side Effects would use, but it's basically breaking down how they set up their standard or classic shader or whatever you want to call it. But they're doing fancier stuff with energy conservation for layered BSDFs or BRDFs or just surface models. But they just talk about how having these parameters and stuff behave in an artist-friendly fashion. These parameters are more similar to the classic shader. So I think that's why people coming from the Arnold world are just using these parameters. That's why they'll tend to use that classic shader. And I need to add more music to my folder. I think I was starting to repeat stuff. So this is kind of a little bit cleaner. So I've been trying to go through and find stuff that's royalty free, or I don't know, it's unrestricted essentially. So I'm still trying to find other sources and stuff. So I just found stuff on SoundCloud for this that's set up with that licensing model. Yeah, it does. Some of it is a little. I had to make sure. There were some that were pretty hype. I didn't want the dance floor bangers to happen. You break your concentration or whatever. But yeah, so I think with streaming and playing music, hopefully this will work. I'm recording the stream or whatever in case, but sometimes Twitch will go in and mute parts of the stream if their algorithm detects the rights of the music are set up a certain way. YouTube has some similar restrictions or issues that it will impose too. So that's generally why originally I was streaming without any music. The very first one, the Terrain. So this guy was actually, I don't know if he's I think it might be a different time zone for him. But Rakesh, is Rakesh in my chat? Rakesh. But yeah, he was doing sharing some works in progress in the Discord with some pretty cool God rays using the atmospheric volume stuff in Redshift. That's pretty cool. And then this Terrain kind of stuff was one of the first streams that I did at the start of the year. So I recorded it and I had this intro music that I spent a lot of time picking out and stuff like that. And then the first 5 or 10 minutes of this video don't have audio because Twitch muted that segment of my stream or whatever. So it was super frustrating. So that's one of the reasons why you just have a lot of problems with audio and stuff like that. what is this instrument? This is like a what is the name of that? It's like an electric piano. It's a harpsichord. Harpsichord. Like the 17th century people. Beethoven getting everyone riled up. So sometimes with these noises, it's cool to work like at a low frequency and get your broad shapes blocked out. And then, yeah, it's just the first few minutes. Like I should have caveated that in the description or something like that. But like when I start, I don't want to, so I think I have it muted here or whatever. But if you make it far enough into that video, my dialogue and stuff like that is recorded. It might be like 15 minutes in or something like that, but the rest of this stuff is, the audio is there, and the files that go along with it are still around, so it's still somewhat useful. Maybe if I get more, once I get more followers or people in the subscribe to this channel and stuff, I might revisit this just to do a fresh recording that actually has the full audio, and I'll be a little bit more experienced streaming and doing everything else. So usually I'll block out sometimes these broader shapes. That's a Prince, it's a very rare Prince hoodie with it's like the 1999 album cover or whatever. You think the white t-shirt is the best streaming attire? So I'm just doing the broad shapes with this guy, and then we can layer or composite even these noises. So I can do like a higher frequency one at a lower amplitude or a lower strength, and then merge the two of these. So hopefully I can just add some small detail but keep my broad shape if I'm happy with it. Well, no more work. It's Friday. Depending on what time zone it is for you, it might already be your weekend. Hey, thanks. It's good to see you, Splatterteague. 4 a.m., then it's definitely time for you to stop working. So yeah, so people who are just joining in the middle of the stream or whatever, doing a slightly different format today where I'm just making kind of like a daily art or Instagram type sketch, more of a chill hangout session. The Cool Zone. You guys know about the Cool Zone? You're asking the other chatters how many are working with Houdini professionally? I think that there's some way for me to set up polls or votes. I'm too much of a boomer to figure out how to use Twitch. I think using I don't know, it's a good idea to try to ease Houdini into your workflow if you're already like working professionally, but with other software. Like you can generate a mesh using Houdini and then export it with Alembic back into whatever application you usually use for rendering and lighting and shading and stuff like that. Or if you know like Daz or Marvelous Studio or stuff, you can generate like fabrics and then bring them into Houdini to do more modeling and stuff with. Yeah, I guess with advertising it's a little bit harder just because the workflows, the client demands are, so the turnarounds are so tight that you don't really have time to mess around with stuff you don't know. This noise right here is really hard to get something looking good. Maybe this, we'll just go with this for now. Try to keep this around 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer. Let's see what happens. So I'm doing some curl noises inside of this VOP. You think I should add a turbulent noise? As far as I know, the turbulent noise is just a single value. Like it's not a 3D direction, right? Oh, I guess you can do it with that. So you, and then which one do you do? Everyone has their own favorite kind of noises. Yeah, the camera model in Maya is definitely the best camera I've ever seen. Sometimes I'll open up Maya just to admire it. Like as you change the lens like length, the actual like 3D representation of your camera updates. It's amazing. So I'm gonna update my fall off a little bit to get just to change the zones that this stuff is happening in. Do you guys know about the cool zone? So apparently we're in the cool zone right now. One of these there's a political writer, let me check. I'm trying to find it here. Hold on. Maybe we could do a cheat one eventually. The cheat zone. He was basically saying when unemployment exceeds 30%, certain factors, political factors happen. You enter a zone called the cool zone. I think he's basically saying it's like a time where interesting, I've heard other people try to analyze it or whatever, but he's saying like, it's basically not, it's not a fun time to live through, but it's a fun time to read about later on. So I was just updating the fall off for this one to get it, I don't know, playing with the contrast or like the harshness of things. Let's try something like this. And then maybe, right now this is kind of omnidirectional. I want more of like, so I already have my lines traveling this way across his face, and then I want the lines going like the opposite or perpendicular to this, instead of right now it's a little bit less dynamic or whatever. You're in Sweden? I don't know. I've heard every country has their own things they're trying to work out. I've heard that the police in Sweden are a lot nicer, but then they've essentially like just kind of like in The Wire, like they've turned some neighborhoods or regions into just like unpoliced regions, and it's just like gang like rule in those areas. I don't know. I might be vastly uninformed. So I want a direction going this way. So we just look down here and it's like positive x, positive y, negative x a little bit. Yeah, nobody really knows what's going to happen here. The police, people are calling for them to go away, but then it's like something would replace them if it's organized crime, Jeff Bezos with his Alexas hitting you on the head with a bat. Like, so something's gonna fill that gap. So sometimes I just I hit Control B and jump into full frame view with my VEX Code. And a big reason why I do that is to stop any cooking happening outside of it. So if your viewport is active, then every time you change these settings, like your VEX Code updates and your scene slows down, you have to wait a minute or whatever. So if I'm making a lot of changes to my code, sometimes I'll just do Control B to stop things from cooking. So it looks like my direction way too strong. Yeah, sometimes it's a bit of a pain to keep going down there to change stuff that way. There's also, if you go into like the Houdini hotkeys, you can actually bind this update mode to a hotkey. Like I haven't done it recently because it's kind of a pain to keep a bunch of customizations like that in your Houdini directory if you freelance at different facilities and stuff like that. So I don't want to rely on like too much custom stuff that won't be everywhere that I work. But going into manual mode is definitely a faster way to work when you're just making a lot of changes, whether it's Control B, switching, or just doing stuff that way. So that's kind of all that I wanted to do with this thing. If I just add some more zeros, we'll kind of turn it off. Just trying to bias that stuff along a different direction. So you're asking if the bottom part is a little bit too empty or too sparse? I was kind of liking some of the negative space, but basically you can composite your points that you're turning into trails as well. So right now I'm doing these uniformly. I just was like, this is 10 minutes until the supervisor is coming over to look at my work. This would be the way that I would switch it, is just very quickly deleting everything except those points, and then scattering some additional points there, and then merging my all these points here are going to be source points for my trails. So now you can see I've already increased the density in that area, if that answers your question. So you can just sprinkle in extra points in that area or whatever area. If you wanted to take a little bit more time, you can just do like a paint. Maybe they updated the name of this a little bit. But if you paint, it's a little bit better, because then you're not. It's always bad to use these face numbers or delete by selection like that. I guess just in terms of Houdini people's mentality or whatever, they don't Because your setup is no longer procedural at that point. I can't switch this out to a pig head and have other stuff update or whatever. But I don't know. I was kind of liking how it's a little bit less dense in that area. It's almost it adds like a little bit of interest or mystery to what you're making. It's like something that's just a little bit of additional layer of complexity or whatever. I was also playing around with merging his shape underneath. Sometimes when you peek stuff inwards, it doesn't work out that well. Is it like overlaps, collapses in on itself essentially? Sometimes the VDB workflow is better. Yeah, so kind of a bit of contrast or just variance overall in your image. I don't know, for compositional reasons or whatever, you don't want things to look too uniform or just too much the same, I guess. I mean, it's objective, right? You can say you like anything you want for any reason. It's also good, I mean, not even in terms of personal taste, but it's a good question to raise, just like how would you deal with this issue or this problem that's how would you address this if this was a potential note from someone? So I'm converting it to a VDB here, because then you can do in erode. It's kind of like peeking stuff inwards, but this way it won't collapse, like it won't protrude through itself. It will just shrink inwards, and then it will disappear instead of poking out the other side like the peak stop would. And then we can just go back to polygons with this one. So now we have a black shape inside of it, just because it's either because of normals or colors or something like that. You can just scale it down. Sometimes like your eye sockets will no longer line up with the with it if you scale it down, because those will move, if that makes sense, like those will move overall. They'll go from here to down here instead of this operation here is just a little bit different. Depending on what shape it is, if it's a sphere or something like that, you can get away with that. Yeah, sorry, I'm still adjusting my levels and everything, but I can. What do you think? Is this volume's a little bit better? We're in the cool zone now. Let me know if these levels are better. I could go down even more. How's that sound? So, thank you, yeah. So it just works a little bit differently, I guess, depending on, you can translate stuff, and if you have a sphere or a box, it will work perfectly, but with these more complex shapes, the eye sockets would move and it would, sorry, I'm not trying to, to flame you. It's a super typical, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to find a good workflow or whatever with Instagram. Like, if you try to make stuff that's too different than what everyone else is making, people don't give you likes or comments, and then just, otherwise everything just kind of starts to, I don't know. It's a hard place to be in. You compromise your integrity as an artist and just feed the feed, just give it more stuff for people to scroll, or do you try to make something unique? So I'm just looking for another geometry right now to add in. I'm gonna grab a like actual bust. I think it's from that 3D Scans website. So I'm gonna grab this bust and treat this like the skull is inside of his head. So it looks like my normals are reversed, just the way that model was made. It also seems to be upside down. We'll try to flip everything upside down at the end and see what it looks like. But I'm gonna try to line what's going on here. Oh, okay. I was in the wrong zone. So I want to line this up with the skull first, and then we could flip it upside down and see what happens. I don't remember adding this song. Got the police. They're coming for me. Ooh. What happened to him? Blah. So we got Beethoven here. He's just missing his harpsichord. So it looks like my eye sockets are I don't know. Are you streaming your projects? I'm sniping your stream. It's like instead of finding your position in the game, I'm finding your ideas. I mean, that kind of happens anyways with Instagram. Everyone's doing the same ideas and stuff like that. So sometimes I just use these null nodes as like a bypass or to turn them off. And you could also do trying to line these up. Oh, did they get rid of it? Is there no more point stop inside of Houdini? No. That used to be my favorite one to use. So so sometimes if you're like I don't want to do the up and hide right now. But if you're lighting stuff up, sometimes just using this alpha point attribute, the viewport will recognize it. depending on what you're doing, it can be make it easier to see what's going on. Alright, it's starting to just get close enough. I'm not going to spend too much time getting it matching perfectly. But yeah, I used to use that. The only reason I would use the old point stop was to do, because it had a slider on it for the alpha channel. So it's just a quick way of modifying the alpha. Alright, I think something like that is close enough. And then with these 3D scans that you get, sometimes they're quite too high of a resolution. Sometimes just doing polyreduce, remesh, or other nodes like that, but this can just speed up the rest of your operations. You even get away with super low values sometimes. Like this is just 5%, but visually it didn't really change the silhouette or outline or whatever that way. But now my scene and everything else is super fast. If you want, like at the end, you could just bypass that if you want high resolution stuff, or it's, I don't know, in the render if you're doing a shader, you might not notice that it's low resolution or low poly or whatever. Look at that. He's stanced up. The remesh with adaptive is nice, but I'm just trying to work quickly right now. I find that the remesh gives you super good quality, but in terms of running the process, it can be a little bit slow. So if I'm just trying to do something quickly, this one, if you're making like an asset that is going to be used like 30 times by a bunch of other people, you're going to use it a lot later on, it makes sense to spend the time to do a proper remesh. I'm being kind of lazy, using hacks, maybe more hacks than cheats right now. I thought at some point I thought there was a way to actually like rotate this handle around. Maybe I just have to type in values. Yes, I'm trying to kind of do, I want to try to do something like it's peeling back different layers. I'm gonna do a skull with Beethoven hair. It's a cool idea to do the hair in Houdini with fluid simulations and stuff like that. This one guy that I worked with a while back, Tomasz, you guys might recognize him, his name from the Oddforce forum. But he had done something, you kind of do it with Tomasz Schlenik. Masters. So I think it's like Bournemouth. He did a project making like a woman's afro out of like a pyroclastic smoke simulation. I think I'm misspelling everything right now. This is a while ago from him, which is super impressive to make this kind of stuff at like 2012. But he was making hair and cloth and accessories or like fashion kind of makeup, cosmetic stuff out of Houdini simulations. It was a super cool concept. And then the dress, I don't know where the dress is. The lava dress was pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know how he was doing all that stuff. Like, still looks better than a lot of stuff today, and that was like 10 years ago. Yeah, you saw his name probably from the Vimeo stuff. You look him up. Just his posts on OddForce and the Side Effects forums are super helpful, and then his demo reel and Vimeo stuff he has a really good eye for everything. So I'm just gonna make less of these lines overall. So I want to convert them to actual geometry. I don't know. Things aren't working too well right now. So I'm going to try to spread out, expand this shape a little bit, just to get some, ooh, it's pretty cool. Just to get some distance or gaps or whatever. Yeah, so this weekend I'm still figuring out my streaming schedule. This is probably going to be back to more of the lecture-based streams of going over specific rigid body simulation or destruction topics. So there's a schedule in my Streamlabs panels at the bottom of my Twitch channel. I'm still figuring all that stuff out, but I think basically like the closer the time comes to the actual like projected streaming time, the more precise the more likely it will be. But if it's like a schedule timed like a week out, it may or may not happen. So I might need to This might be another time for the VDB operations. So I'm just gonna replicate that set of nodes right here. Looks like the drag and drop stuff is... I don't know if it's my too many like streaming windows open or something like that, but it doesn't... Houdini doesn't like it. This time I'm gonna dilate to expand everything. Alright, I think I figured it out. So I think having that skull inside of him is going to be a problem. Ooh, something like that. That kind of angle looks like it's pretty good. Try it the other way. This is more like the Batman Two-Face. So it looks like he's a bit too I think this operation here is better to do after the poly reduce. So I'm going to try to push like 30 more minutes maybe on this stuff. Just try to nail a better composition. Start kind of wrapping things up. Don't look behind him. Just hide all the problems of penetration and stuff like that. Yeah, so I was saying that this there's a couple things I want to try to fix. I don't know which ones I want to try to do in enough time. Let's just try getting rid of this something like that could be better. Yeah, I think this is just going to be a bit too weird. Too many things going on for right now. So, like I was saying earlier, we have these biasing or just overlapping, intersecting issues. Which I think is like happening at this step. Basically, they're all going through the velocity field. So they're all getting pushed through the same like motion field or motion values or whatever. I think to get rid of this stuff, like they're peeling off, that happens because I it's a cool thing. You might want to keep it. I'm gonna end up fixing it. So that was happening because I changed the position of the points to move them outwards, but then I'm still projecting them onto the same surface with that velocity thing. So if I just switch to the wider puffed out surface, that will fix that issue. And then my widths, all these guys are going through the same, they all want to follow the same directions, so they're overlapping. I think we can fix that quite easily. So I'm just going to add to the point position. If you do this sample sphere uniform, this just gives you a unit length vector, like a direction in 3D space, essentially. And to give it a seed, like, there's different things you could do. Maybe people would typically do the point number, but I'm going to do the primitive number. So basically, this is super big values that I gave it right now, I think. Something happened here that's not what I was expecting. Let's just try dividing that to get it back down. Maybe I need to make sure to tell it it's a vector. And then I think I need to actually use this random function. I think that was the problem. So it's expecting like multiple values here, like two floats. So this random function will automatically generate like as many values as this sample sphere uniform needs. So now I can apply like a little offset to everything. And that should fix most of the overlaps. These small ones that you see here, like you could just add a seed, like a new parameter, and try different numbers until you fix the problematic ones or whatever. These little individual points here are created, or they happen from the advect points. If you want to get rid of them, you can just do an add node with polygons, remove unused points, and then that one will just get rid of any points that don't belong to primitives. So any particles are just points that are standing by themselves. This remove unused points will get rid of them. And then I think I might want to increase the overall amount of lines that I'm creating so that the skull shape is more readable. Like visually, you're able to tell what's inside of him a little bit more. His chin got a little goatee or mustache or something like that. And then I think we could just make him a little bit bigger to fix that. It looks like my hair is getting out of control right now because of the lockdown. So, everyone, you have two options. You can either give yourself like a nice buzz cut, or you could grow a mullet. Those are the two options you have right now. So I might just want to make this noise a little bit more interesting now that I'm layering up so many shapes. Like layering up so many of these lines, essentially. So one thing we can do with these vector 4s, is why I like to have them. It's just going to be a still right now. We might revisit it later or something like that, or I might just never do anything else with it. But just with the time constraints, it's going to be too much to do an animation. But you could have like this. You could actually make a smoke simulation with this stuff expanding outwards. That'd be a pretty cool way to animate things. So basically what I'm going to do right here is take the primitive number, which is basically an ID or the number of each line, use it to generate a random number, and then offset my curl noises in the fourth component or whatever of it. I don't know, there's too much. Then you scale this to basically decide how much randomness you want, like per line. So the closer you get to 0 would be no noise, and super high values, things will get super fuzzy. So this will just let us break up a little bit of these guys, so they aren't all like 100% congruent. Yeah, I have too many unfinished projects overall, and then just figuring out with the stream and everything, like how I'm trying out different formats. I feel like actually taking the time now and finishing some of this stuff and posting it would help grow the viewers or the audience or whatever. So I might try that, but then I also don't want to just put up unfinished or bad stuff. So it's you understand my pickle. It's always more fun to start a new project than to finish something like 80% done, though, at least for me. Just take a look at this and see what it looks like. Yeah, I mean, I guess part of it too just depends on like if you're just trying to do reps, like you're at a gym or something like that, and you want to learn skills, exercise your mind. It's good to just try a bunch of stuff and not necessarily see it all the way out. But then in terms of a more traditional artist skill or like eye or whatever, it's good to finish stuff and like develop your eye that way. So it's just part of being a CG artist, is there's so many different things to focus on: math, physics, technical software stuff, and artistic compositional stuff. It's just too intimidating sometimes. How did you find my stream? Through... Seems like people are either here through Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, I would say. Most likely maybe Twitter? Oh, Reddit. Yeah, I was posting some stuff there to try to share simulation things. It seems like I don't really know what was going on with Reddit, how to have to view things that way, but I got a lot of karma from my posts, so that was good. Yeah, CG Wiki, Matt, he was very nice and gave me a plug, at least on Twitter. I'm not in his Discord, so I don't know about that, but I appreciate him helping me out. He was saying he's jealous because he wants to have the time to get on Twitch and do these streams and everything like that, but he has a lot of distractions with his kids and family and everything. It's too much loud noises and distractions to be able to sit down and stream for like 3 hours out of the day or whatever. It's a time commitment. So I don't know, I'm kind of questioning my directional... Let's see what happens with negative. Like push this stuff in a little bit. Oof. If everything was like set up with collisions, it'd be cool. Like this stuff is getting blown the other direction or whatever. It's gonna be too much. I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back. All right, this is starting to look better. Yeah, I saw your multi-solver suggestion. I think doing the flip with RBD stuff could be interesting, especially like with a destruction context or something like that, where it's like pieces of stone falling and they might not float, but some like pieces of wood planks floating on the water or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's just part of it too. Is just my experience overall. I come from a very visual effects artists are generally destroying stuff, and then if you're doing commercials or advertisements, you're making like abstract. I don't know, fluid motion or whatever. So you're either destroying stuff, or you're making weird like organic things. Those are the two main markets or whatever for your skills. All right, so let's see. Getting close to the end of the stream. Let's go in with some lighting and see what we can do. So I generally don't like to keep things like in the same network when they're different primitive types or whatever, if that makes sense. So we have something here that's polygonal surface. So we have something here that's the polygonal surface, and then we have curves in this input. So usually I'll do a null so that I can render them in separate geometry or object containers. So do out statue bust. I don't know what's gonna happen here, but I'm just gonna try to give this some thickness real quick. This might blow up. Sometimes you can do the point normal. I don't have the lab stuff installed. How does the thicken work? I'm just gonna do a VDB. So the extrude in both directions will give you a stable value? I have the lab stuff in my directory. I just don't have it like set. I don't have the environment variable set or whatever. I'm trying to keep everything, most of the stuff with these streams to be like out of the box Houdini, so it's, I don't know, I always get nervous about doing a tutorial or training or whatever, and then it's like, download these 20 different, yeah, the packages, environment stuff, management stuff of Houdini is pretty cool. It's like the JSON XML structure or whatever. But yeah, I'm always hesitant to set up like a tutorial or something, and then it's like, download these 80 different plugins, spend a bunch of time setting them up, and then you can get the same result that I got. I don't know. So this is, now it's just, he's gonna be a blobby, a fatty surface. Let's see what this looks like. Blobtoven. I don't know. I'm gonna ditch this this one. So we'll just keep him thin for right now. And then I don't think I want normals on those right now. So with this object, I'm gonna use this as redshift strands, and this one will, it recognizes that width attribute as well. So I don't need to worry about that. Just go into this, make a redshift. Just start with a light. Whoa. Let's just see what happens. This seems a little bit weird, the way that this light is doesn't seem like things are lined up essentially. Might be the way that the direction that these ones are rotating in or something like that. Like if they're strips, they might not be lined up perfectly at the camera. Might be my camera, yeah, okay, so I wasn't my camera was in a weird position. Then these cameras, I usually do 36 here, so it's like a standard sensor size for SLR or something like that. I was thinking about Octane. I was looking it up a little bit. They have that Vectron stuff for like fractals that looks pretty cool. Yeah, from what I've heard from other people, the Houdini integration of Octane is a pretty horrific thing to work with. But overall, just the results I've seen are pretty incredible, especially with like displacement maps and stuff that people do with Octane. It seems super sharp when it displaces stuff. It corrupts your files. You guys were using it with Houdini or with Cinema 4D? I feel like Octane with Cinema 4D is a super good plugin, but the Houdini one they haven't spent as much time on or something. Something's going on right now with my Redshift. It's acting a little bit. It's acting a little buggy or something. You might need to It heard us talking about Octane. It's like, no, sabotage him. Okay, so I think the other problem too is these capsules is pretty memory intensive for Redshift to draw the capsules on the lines essentially. There we go. We're back in good shape. So I think these guys should be getting set with that width attribute, but it looks like that might not be the case right now. Oh, I think for whatever reason, Redshift, it wants you to have that set as p-scale. It's a little weird. It's like Houdini's using one thing. I guess with Houdini you can use either, but Redshift, it just makes it a little bit. Yeah, the colors we can use as well. It's like the ones with Houdini, we just had to add the shader node to pull in the surface colors. Just do the same thing with Redshift. Beethoven's back with his harpsichord. So we'll do material network, RS material, and then if you just do the particle attribute or point attribute with color, then we might need to just refresh our render view to get it to update the shader. Nope. Looks like we did something wrong. Okay, so I haven't set the material to my object yet. Just pull that out so you can see it. Alright, so I'm going to go to my Redshift. I'm going to add the indirect diffuse, like the GI. Get that going. And we'll just add a grid for the ground plane. I'm just going to set it to invisible, like a phantom object or whatever. Let's see what that gives us. So now we have some more stuff for it to reflect or light to bounce around on. Sometimes I'll turn off visibility of those lights or whatever, just because they're a little distracting when you see them in the render. And I think maybe these guys are just a little bit too thin. It's like hard to see a lot of definition in the shape of his face. Let's see what happens with that. Then I'm just gonna grab the rest of the statue. So before we get too far into the actual lighting stuff, just make sure we're looking at everything. So I don't know how those guys get a lot darker than the statue. Might be some of this material settings. Might also want to try a different material, maybe like this paper. Looks like that might be a little bit better. Then let's grab a little bit less of these streamers overall. That's what I'm calling these, I don't know, pasta noodles. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not not too happy with how it looks right now. I might just go into the spotlight, so I have a little bit more control over some of this stuff. So we still have that chin area poking through. I'm actually just gonna move the light around a little bit more. And then let's get another material on the statue, so we can control that a little bit better. I think it's just way too bright right now. So we'll do default plastic. I don't know. That'll get us somewhere. It's either going to be like a little toy plastic, or it might be close to like a marble or something like that. And then I just need to get rid of that color. There was no color attribute on him. Yeah, I guess I don't have experience with Octane to compare it with. But it's possible the Redshift lights aren't... You don't have as much control over them in terms of parameters, I know. Like Arnold, you have some more things you can do with the spread to simulate like barn doors and stuff like that. But with Redshift, it just seems like they're a little bit more thrown in at the last minute. They haven't spent as much time implementing the parameters for the lights. So I'm gonna try to fix that chin sticking through. Maybe we just need to drop him down a little bit. Whoops. Is that changing the scale? Looked like it was squishing. I think that's the right thing to do. Now, this stuff up here looks a little bit of a mess right now. Might be the way that the noise, like I offsetted the frequency or pattern of it a little bit per ribbon. Let's fix that. You can do more or less iterations of this to kind of just choose how far the noise is going through those functions. It's kind of cool. just do all the post effects of Redshift. It's done. But usually you can make a big mess if you set up your lights like with these active, because you really won't know like what you're looking at or whatever. I've made that mistake before. I think this monochromatic stuff looks a little bit more interesting. Maybe maybe we want to try out some of these other ramps I was doing, just see what happens. This could be more interesting if it's like super austere, black and white, going to a bunch of different... I selected the wrong colors. So this is kind of interesting because these are more like brain inside of the body kind of colors or whatever. I think this is a better idea that we're onto right now. Let's try making this stuff thicker. It's kind of cool, like stacks of paper or something. Let's try some more iterations to get this stuff. Let's try a ton. Yeah, I have both the color corrections in the hip, or both the color ramps, like the palettes or whatever. I'm just switching between them like that. I have a bad habit of keeping everything in the hip. It's like, I always want to have the options to use it, but then it just leads, sometimes other people look at the file and they're like, what were you doing with all this other stuff? So let's play around with these noise functions a little bit and just try to get like a better, cleaner pattern or whatever. I might try adding some Z, like directional bias, to get this like going backwards or whatever. I think I'm going the wrong way. I negated it here, so I'm tricking myself. It was me. It's me after the guillotine. So let's try to do. Yeah, it's. I don't know if other, like, Mantra will update pretty quickly, and then there's Solaris with Karma. I'm actually interested in using Redshift in the Hydra viewport or whatever. That would be even faster. But I'm trying out different workflows, like of you've kind of sketched something or you find something you want to make and then you try to replicate it that way. This is more of a technical, like building the tools and then iterating and trying different experiments after you've built the tools. So kind of different workflows. Like if you're an artist, you're making something with a pencil, you have a lot of control over it. If you're doing like a art with fluid, like mixing paint in milk or something like that, you don't have as much control and you're just doing more experiments with like the techniques, kind of. So it's pretty cool to see these interfering with each other, like overlapping like that. This was like my high frequency noise. I'm just gonna dial that back. I did make a renderer just using like Vex, like some people do. I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but it was when I was working at DreamWorks as a like entry level effects artist. We had to write our own ray tracer or whatever, so we were doing it with Vex, and this was just a little like things or whatever that I rendered when I was working there. You like the look you had before and you want to go back? You have a few different options. Either you might want to just keep saving, like sporadically and versioning up, to keep things going that way, or better than Octane, or sometimes you could work with your auto backup settings to keep track of hip files that way. But I'm kind of right now I'm like zooming out kind of, and I'm just trying to create a very readable idea as to what's going on right now. Before, I don't know, everything was still a little bit messy. I didn't like just like the initial read that you would get if you looked at it, so that's why I was changing it. But yeah, that does happen to me sometimes too, where it's impossible to go back because there's no you've just destroyed your progress, and it's like based off of random values that you don't remember, and there's no record of it. Sometimes it's not a good position to be in, but I don't know. I for entertainment purposes, I like just creating new things. So I'm gonna add another card to this side of him, just to get some more like bounce light and stuff like that happening. You think having the light with the color? What kind of color? You just do it with the temperature. You guys ever do if we wanted this to be a very Instagram looking thing, do you guys ever hear of like bisexual lighting? It's I guess I name it that way because it's like it looks like the bisexual representation flag. If you search it, it's a real thing. If you search it, but it's basically this look that a lot of is popular right now or whatever. So this is the flag for people. So this is a LGBTQ, IAP plus etc. friendly stream. But yeah, it's very 80s, very two-tone color or whatever. But yeah, I guess this is the name. Some people call it this in terms of the lighting. It's a good way to use colored lights or whatever to do like blue and pink from one side and the other. Yeah, it's very Cinema 4D, Kidmograph. A lot of people use it. You always just do your own kind of things like orange and magenta or orange and purple or whatever. Would be cool. You could always replicate it too by coloring these bounce cards and applying colors to them or whatever, and you get a two-tone kind of thing that way. Let's try a little bit of red for right now. Maybe this ground. I don't know. Keep that hidden for right now. Let's go back into the light. And just try to get a little bit better. I'm not a big fan of that shape right now, but I want to... This is pretty cool, what's happening here. So I just want some more light happening inside of it or whatever so you can see what's going on. Then we'll try some different noise values to get a more interesting shape. Rembrandt lighting. It's like how it's the stuff I was doing with the fractals. I was thinking too with an interesting way to do like Rembrandt lighting techniques would be to make volumes in your scene, but they aren't visible to the primary ray. So they're basically only shadowing things. You kind of like suck the light out of areas. It's like very art directable or whatever, but you could, it's kind of like Rembrandt, how there's just like these vacuums of areas with no light in his compositions or whatever. This stuff here is pretty cool. It's like a rubber band ball. His brain was made out of rubber bands or something like that. Rubber band boy. So let's just try to get a little bit of high frequency. All this stuff looks a little bit too smooth. So we'll try to put in some more detail that way. It's a little too much It's too big of an explosion. All right, this could be pretty good. So I'm just gonna go in with my camera now and gonna go in with my camera and try out some different compositional stuff. So I saved my original view, but now I'm just gonna work more like a photographer would on set or whatever. Like you have your subject with lighting. Now I'm just gonna move stuff around and try out different compositions that way. So like punching in like that, it could be pretty cool. Just gonna go to a longer lens. Yeah, the back is, you need to hide that or spend some time to fix it or something like that. I feel like this square composition is pretty boring, but just because it's the Instagram, everyone has to use it. Everyone's stuck in the grid. Yeah, you can do like black bars and then upload it to Instagram. That makes things a little bit more interesting. So I might get the color, I don't know, I kind of like this kind of yin and yang that's happening with like monochromatic and colored. Let's at least try to crop in a little bit so it's not like, I don't know, seeing the full bust is just too generic. It's like just uninteresting or whatever. How to be a CG Instagram influencer. So something like this could be, I mean, these are just general composition, like they apply to photography and other areas too. So let's try, I don't know, like without his mouth maybe, if we frame it up like that. It kind of looks like Abe Lincoln now. So I don't know, something like this could be pretty cool. Something's happening. The upside down, we forgot to do that. Let's do it quickly and see what happens. We need to go, I think we had it right. Let's try to lift. Something happened. Something didn't flip. I'm referencing this. I think it did go, we do need to do like that kind of, something like that. We could go, It's pretty cool. So it's pretty cool to see like the light hitting different areas of it like that. I'm gonna undo it for right now. I'm already, oh man, it's almost 3 hours. I need to, I'm just gonna try to wrap stuff up very quickly. So we're gonna go into the rubber band, like plastic material. And just try to get some more interesting stuff happening with that. So the more we go down in IOR, it's more of like a paper, and then the other way, it's more of like metal. The more it reflects or whatever. There's some cool kind of vibrant stuff happening up there. Yeah, I mean, it's all, those are all colors I stole from somewhere else. So just keep that thievery happening. Let's go into this. Is this the bust? I think I was changing the wrong material. I thought I was changing the rubber band stuff. I was changing the bust. I think something like this is it's pretty cool. It's kind of like a synthetic plastic or something. And then this is the one here that I had meant to be shading. So instead of this just being flat like paper, I wanted to add some more reflectivity or shininess or whatever to it. How long have I been working with Houdini? Like for 30 years. A million years. You guys saw the that instruction manual that I was showing? This was the, let me see if I can change my OBS. So this was the, like, one of the really old instruction manuals of Houdini. You guys could see the, they just not hit the microphone. It's from 1999. This is the instruction manual from 20. What is that? Is that 30? That's 30 years ago, yeah. So I think this stuff, I added the reflections to it, and now we're getting a little bit more brightness or like light bouncing around happening. I think we're pretty good. Let's just try to add some. Is it, I guess it's 21. Yeah, 21 years. I can't do math, obviously. That's why I'm an artist and not a mathematician. So I'm just going to add some depth of field to make this even more Instagrammable. I was noticing that Redshift in the render view, they have a way to set it kind of like Octane. So like if you click to focus, then you can set your focal distance based off that setting. So that will update. See when we move, we click around. No! You don't want the depth of field? Let's go with a very low value. Whoa. So something like that is maybe I don't want to overdo it or anything like that. I don't know if it does have an option to do post effects as its own AOV. You can always turn it off for the file output, and sometimes what I do is load, like you can load an EXR or a render this way and then play with more effects. But it would be nice if you can do post effects as an AOV. It'd be very useful. So turn off this click to focus, set it up, and it looks pretty good. I'm just gonna take another it's one more reason to switch to Octane. I'm gonna take another grid here and make like a backplate or background. Make it visible. My spotlight might be ruining me for this one. Let's see what I can do. I don't know, this is gonna be a little wacky. Might not want to do this and just set the background in post or something like that. That Houdini manual, I don't think I've read it from cover to cover. I've looked it up. I feel like it's more of it's an antique. Most of it's out of date or depreciated at this point. It's like the Bible. You have to read it every year. So oops, something got messed up there. All right, I'm just gonna go with the full frame thing. When you like crop just a sliver off the bottom of your composition, it just doesn't. It looks like a mistake. It doesn't look that good. Then I think we can go a little bit brighter with our statue material, just to get him up closer to white. And I think we're good there. I'm gonna move. I'm gonna just play around with the ground plane, just my bounce light to finish that up. Then we'll just toggle the statue, like that poly reduce off to get a full detail for him, and then we'll be in final. So ground, we'll just gonna shrink it down to get some more contrast. Similar idea with this one. All right, I think that's good enough So this is what I was talking about with the poly reduce. You can just disable that. Things takes a little bit longer because I wanted to update all of this stuff like interactively, but now for the final. This is at 6 a.m. It's the sunrise. So we just get a little bit more specular, just interest and detail and definition and stuff like that. I think we're good. Let's just do some play around with these post effects, and then we'll be final. I don't know. I think it's like a scan artifact, or it might be like Beethoven had a zit or something like that. So I'm gonna crank the oversaturation to really differentiate like the two of those monochromatic and then the colors. This bloom it's easy to get carried away with it. Like way too sparkly there or whatever. Something like that is maybe a little bit nice. Even that's too much, I think. You can show me up and make it look 20 times better just by exporting it to Octane. I think this is feeling pretty good. Let's just play around with this Black Crush. I don't know how much I want to slam those values down. I think it's this little kick right here is pretty cool. It's like sad clown makeup or something like that. Yeah, so this is call it final. Gonna save it as another version. I don't know about, I can't distribute the Billy's skull, so you're gonna have to buy it from him or find a different geometry or whatever to replace it. For this file, with the Beethoven geometry, you can find that just on the 3D Scans website. So I could save. I don't want to put the geometry with the file just because it's a lot of stuff to distribute. It's a lot of stuff for me to host on the Google Drive or whatever. Yeah, that's okay. I'm wrapping up the stream right now. So I'll post the file up. This will be the end. We got a long one today. A long boy. I'm gonna try to do these dailies, like just making something simple, maybe somewhat more regularly and maybe a little bit quicker in the future. Let me know what you guys think in the Discord suggestions, if this is a good idea, or the music with things was a little too loud at the start. But I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the Friday. See you tomorrow. We'll be doing more lecture-based, technical, I don't know, slower paced stuff or whatever. All right, see you tomorrow.